So thanks for showing up tonight. As Duarte said, my name is Leo, and my project is the Peace Museum. Peace is an acronym, as you see here. People evolve as consciousness expands. Has to do with the theory I'm working with about us as human beings actually have the ability to affect our own biological evolution through the span of our lifetimes through consciousness exploration, the expansion of consciousness. And how I define consciousness expansion is the combination of meaningful information with emotional charge. If you do that, so for example, you go to an art show, you see some fantastic art you've never seen before, your synaptic pathways are firing in a manner that they've never fired before. Therefore, something new is happening inside your brain, inside your heart together, and that is an expansion of consciousness. And I've been, I guess, inadvertently studying consciousness most of my adult life. Started with the U.S. Navy, and group management, group think, group leadership led me to become a TQM practitioner, particularly surrounding the work of W. Edwards Deming, which was a sort of a hybrid fusion between Western management styles and industrial approaches and process and Eastern philosophies together. Today, the Deming Prize in Japan is one of the most coveted business prizes that they have. And he's one of the most honored foreigners in all of their history. And so right now, the Peace Museum is kind of a concept. We do have a couple of physical locations, but we could curate shows anywhere. And we curate what I call experibitions. So they're consciousness experiments. So if you look right over here, we're actually doing a live consciousness experiment tonight, collecting data and drawing correlation or putting in correlations. And so all of our events are both experiments as well as regular art events, showing my own artwork as well as curating the works of others. Currently have a space at American Steel Studios. I'll get into that a little bit later. And I've been, one of the things I've done is many years I spent at Union Square art dealer. And I guess it was about 10 years ago, this man here, Leonard Schlein, came into our gallery. I wasn't there, but he purchased a work of art. It was sort of a pop art approach of Einstein. And everybody came, after the day was done, everybody came back to me and said, Leo, this told me about the guy. And he's like, he talks just like you. You got to get his book. And so I was like, okay. And I ended up buying his book, completely changed my life. And I went on, not just because of this book, but there was other people involved, mentors and such. But I took this as a perspective of reality, and it really did enable me to be a better art dealer. I was able to connect to people at a sort of an ethereal level, and over about a 5-year period, placed over 400 individual works of art in private collections, and valued well over $5 million. And what a lot of people would look at that, particularly at the time, and say, wow, you're a good salesperson. And I really wasn't. I'm not a very good salesperson. And I've been fired pretty much of every sales job I've ever had, where my job was to sell. But as an art dealer, I didn't consider myself a salesperson. I was an educator, giving people an expanded perspective, and a lot of this philosophy from Leonard Schlein. And one of the premises that he had in the book is that, and I think it has everything to do with the collective consciousness, and that is innovative strides forward in science would often parallel innovative strides forward in art. It's sort of one and the same. And if you look back throughout history, Leonardo da Vinci is a great example. All great artists are somewhat scientists, and vice versa. If you talk to scientists at the very top level, doctors, you hear this over and over again. Well, it's really kind of an art. You hear that. So when you get to the pinnacle of whatever you do, there has to be a creative part of that. And a great example of what he was talking about was the Surrealists. If you look at the early 20th century, we saw expansive, greater understanding of time, light, reality. that paralleled, so for example, Einstein's theory of relativity. That was early 20th century. And you go back and you look at the works of de Chirico, Salvador Dali, a lot of the surrealists. They were examining the exact same things: form, motion, perspective, alternate realities, different dimensions. All of those were happening in the art world, and they were completely unaware of the exact same thing happening in the science world, and vice versa, because both of the fields, the surrealists and the sort of avant-garde artists or scientists, were underground. Where was Einstein, the dean of a physics department, when he came up with relativity? No, he was sitting as a patent clerk, looking at other people's inventions. And so oftentimes we see innovations coming not from, the universities, industries, corporations. The Wright brothers is another great example. At the time, people often credit the Wright brothers with flight, but they don't understand the context of which it happened. During that period, flight was on everybody's mind. Corporations were pumping, by today's standards, millions and millions and millions of dollars into flight. There were many other people had much more resources and much more advantage than the Wright brothers, but they did it. And I think that what is that? What's the necessity? I'm just losing it. Yes, the mother invention. So we often see that coming from outside the world, and this book, Art and Physics, really delves into deeply is why and how that works. So for me, that was sort of the part of my first sort of venture into consciousness, because I was really curious. I have an engineering background, systems, power plants, stuff like that, interrelated systems, and it was like, okay, I had sold over $1 million of art and never painted a painting. So I was in something I didn't fully understand, and I was really fascinated as what is creativity, what is inspiration, how does they work synaptically, why do we have art movements, why does one artist do fantastic and their stuff is seemingly mediocre next to somebody who's a wonderful artist, I think, and they can never catch a break, it seems like. So there's these different sort of random dynamics in the art world that I was looking at and wondering, how does this all work? And so I got into consciousness not to build something or to create inventions or any of that. It was just sort of a heuristic exploration into why does this work? And fast forward several years later, Entangled Minds crossed my desk, and I came across the Global Consciousness Project, in which a group of Princeton scientists found that this particular type of technology, it's a solid-state processor with an electron tunneling device in it, is apparently affected by human consciousness. And that grew into what became the Faire Labs, Princeton Anomalies Research Laboratories. And I have examples. That's the same technology we're doing the experiment with, and this lamp is also one. So this lamp is technically, from my perspective, a quantum computer. It's because inside of there's a solid-state processor that does computations, makes it a computer, and it has an electron tunneling device which helps create the data which interprets it. We can get into the details later. If you have questions afterwards, I'd be happy to answer them. But this is it's called a mind lamp, but a lot of people call it the mood lamp too. So it's kind of like it's not so much a sensor as I like to think of it as a buoy. It's like a buoy of consciousness. So it detects spatial distortions created at the electron level, and then it's translated into data. And that data can be sent to electronic devices to do various things. This is simply creating light. And the book in the middle here is something I wrote in between reading both of these about philosophy, art, science, but it's 400 rhyming poems, and just had to throw my own in there for a bit. So recently, I got involved in consciousness hacking about a year ago, and was invited to have my research featured as part of the transformative tech portion of the Science and Non-Duality Conference that happens every year for the last, 7-8 years now, at the Dolce Hayes Mansion in San Jose. And So I was invited back this year, and I submitted a abstract that was accepted. And so so I'll be, in October, I'm going to be presenting my unified theory of consciousness, time, and quantum mechanics. That's the title of it, is The Edge of Aslan's Razor and Spatial Relativity. I'm not going to read all of this out, but this was what I had submitted, and basically I have a unified theory of consciousness. And what I mean by that, you often hear the phrase TOE, theory of everything. That's not what I'm working on. With the Faire labs, one of the big questions was they knew that this device was influenced by people, but they couldn't explain the randomness, and they couldn't, or there wasn't a unified theory around that. So my unified theory of consciousness has to do specifically with this technology. What is it about technology that affects this, how and why? That's what I'm going to be presenting. And here is just a brief bit of it. This is actually probably a 2-hour presentation to get into the whole thing. But if you'd like to get tickets, you can talk to us afterwards. It's the Science and Non-Duality Conference. And we'll be displaying some pretty cool stuff there as well. But after a brief history, one of the things we're going to talk about is the random event generators. That's what these are. And what they do. And so one of the things I found that when you really delve into a phenomenon or a scientific theory, there are no finite answers. These are things that are under revision over time. Has anybody ever heard of the double slit experiment? Double slit experiment. Cool. The first ones were conducted by a scientist named Young 200 years ago. So it's a cornerstone of physics and education and training, and there's still unanswered questions about that experiment. And so when we're talking about quantum physics and quantum tunneling and a lot of the technology is really only about 30 to 40 years old. And so there are still a lot of unanswered questions, which is the nature of our research. Our investigation is to sort of explain how it works and why it does what it does. And also part of it is taking it, improving it, making it more responsive, and then incorporating this technology into other things, which I'll get into in a bit. One of the things that we also find in science and other problems in life is the Occam's razor's rules, often very true, and that is the most simple. If you look at an entire array of answers to a question, oftentimes it's the most simple. The thing that's staring you right in the face, that's what it is. And so I think my theory definitely falls in that line. Simple yet elegantly complex and beautiful at the same time. One of the things I do address in it, I will be addressing, is multiple dimensions. We've all heard about multiple dimensions, parallel universe, that type of thing. And I take a really very pragmatic approach, again, the Occam's razor approach, and saying take all the speculative stuff, parallel vision or parallel universes, time travel, and just put that in the nice to think about, but not part of this theory. Because I really want to look at what we absolutely know, what we can say that we absolutely know, what is a fact, what is observable, and not so much on the speculation side. And so going into the Science and Non-Duality Conference, I'm much more on the science side than the non-duality side, and hopefully even I'm going to be able to learn a bit more about the non-dualistic side myself. But on the multiple dimensions, I will say this about it is, imagine a pizza, and you cut it into 10 equal pieces. You have basically 10 dimensions, similar. You can't really tell them apart if it's the same type of pizza, but they're all different. Take that same concept and look at a sphere. Okay, now if you had a perfect sphere and you draw equidistant lines from the center and created 10 cones all together, you would have 10 dimensions of the same space, 10 different dimensions, all the same, but yet different. And so when I go into discuss about multiple dimensions, spatial dimensions, that's the approach I'm taking. This theory also, if you after the talk, anybody's welcome to come up here and look at the interface. One of the things I've thought a lot about is time. It probably takes up most of my waking hours is thinking about time. And how does it work? What is spatial distortion, time dilation? Those are really interesting things to talk about. And time affects everything. So when I started looking at this, I started wondering, okay, what is time dilation? How does it affect? We look at time as basically a straight line. Because it's a straight line, we have theories like if you look at Einstein's relativity and as you approach the speed of light, supposedly time slows down, and therefore if you go past the speed of light, it could theoretically move backwards. I think that is really just a misinterpretation of the formula itself, and that there are different aspects of time. A standard, like I call absolute time, it has to do more with the ages, the stars, and then there's time as we can measure it, as humans have the ability to measure the passing of the ages. And so there's two different aspects of it. And so after thinking about this for quite a bit, I came up with a sort of a different, not a different theory of relativity, but a theory of how our consciousness interfaces with time. And part of that had to do with meditative states. And what the theory's leading to is that as the human body fluctuates between extreme states of concentration and meditation, it has a similar effect on time as motion. And so we can measure it in an indirect manner now, and part of the research I'm doing and working on, what we're going to show you in a second, is further developing the technology and the measurement skills to be able to either prove or disprove that concept. Going into the hard question, what is time? What is consciousness? I define consciousness for the purposes of my work. It's an operational definition. It's simply life force. If something has a life cycle, if it's born, hatched, and then eventually dies, then that is some level of consciousness. There's higher levels of consciousness that we have, lower levels that other, animals, plants also possess. And and I think it all comes down, like Tesla said, if you want to think about the universe, just think of energy, vibration, and what was the third? Energy, vibration, and amplitude. So everything's about energy transfer and different states. And so at SAND, I'll be going into more complex understanding of that. So you're all welcome to join us there. Okay. And this is an example of this is actually one of the first experiments I did, or experibitions, and this was at a gallery in the Mission District. And so we have a sensor here. Let's see if I can pull this up. Basically, this is what it looks like. It's got software in it that records data, and it creates a continuous line of data stream. And my thoughts on and understanding of entanglement and trying to explain why this does the way it does was that if entanglement occurs between people who come in contact with each other, and those people have an effect on this technology, then if you had an event over a period of time, there should be some cumulative effect of that. If the sensor itself is in a place where people come in contact with it, they're aware of it somehow, either directly or indirectly, and then move on. If you had more people coming in, they would, even after the people left, because the entanglement is not necessarily spatial related, then there should be some sort of ongoing trend. And this is an example of that happening, actually. So this was a 3-day exhibit. I think it began like on a Thursday night and then went through Sunday. And we saw this long accumulation. There were different correlative data, like, for example, this was at nighttime here, and then this is during the day, so we saw a lot. So you could see another nighttime, and And then over here, we saw it really go outside the standard deviation here. And what these lines up here, the upper and lower standard deviations, represent is they were established through the Princeton Anomalies Research Laboratories over thousands and thousands and thousands of trials, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of experiments over a couple of decades. They established the idea that the data that the REG is putting out is not going to be affected, or people, it's not going, if the data line is outside of the standard deviation, human consciousness had to have an effect on it because they've been calibrated in non-operator environments. So that's where the deviation points come from. And so I've tried this in different environments. I've taken it to sporting events, public events where people knew it was part of it, places where they didn't know it. But here's sort of a more standard example. So this was at an event, the Oakland mayor's inauguration party, which was held at American Steel Studios. We had a studio there, open studio, people could come in, but it wasn't really an art party. It was a celebration. There was all kinds of stuff, a lot of kids coming in. So bands playing in one area. So there wasn't really a concerted focus for everybody to concentrate on it. And there wasn't a shared experience among everybody. And so and this would also be very typical of a sporting event or just taking it out in public. And so part of the research I do is I'll look for data spikes and trends. Those are basically it. And then try to find those correlations, and then create environments where those are going to happen again and again. So here's another one. This was actually my first consciousness hacking that I attended. It was at the headquarters. Where was that? It was in the Soma district. Lumosity, I think it was. Lumosity's headquarters. And nobody knew I was there. I'd never been to a consciousness hacking. And I brought the equipment, set it up in the back, and just started the experiment, didn't tell anybody. And somebody said, "Hey, what's going on?" I told them what I was doing. I said, "Oh, you should meet Mikey. He's the person doing this." So I went up and he introduced himself. He was already familiar with the technology. He's working on a project right now on the REG, so it wasn't a leap for him to understand it. And so he invited me to do a quick introduction of what I was working on at what they call the flashpoint. What's that? Lightning round, yeah. They call it the lightning round. So they invite people to come up and talk for a couple of minutes. So here we see this continuous upward trend. There was 2 speakers, similar to today, and so you had this sort of shared experience, focused. Everybody was focused on the same thing. They were served free alcohol, which it might have an effect. And then right here was actually right when I got up at the end to give the talk. So this represents about 3 hours right here. And then after the whole thing, I get up. So right about here is where I got out of my seat, started standing in line. The other people, I think I was, out of 5 people, I was second. But there was a point where I said, "Hey, I'm doing a consciousness experiment, and the equipment's right there." At that point, that's where I didn't write in here. So we see this huge correlation that really goes beyond the realms of possibility without having consciousness playing a role. It's just not really possible. And if you look at that book, Entangled Minds, it delves into the data very deeply. And if anybody, I think anybody with a reasonable mind, scientific mind, a real nature of inquiry, looks and reads the data, they'll come to the same conclusions. But I found, which was really surprising to me, but a lot of people, if they're introduced to something that's new to them, technology-wise, we don't live in a society where everybody just embraces change or embraces the new thing right away. There's a lot of things that go into that, so the messenger has a lot to do with how the message is received. And because I thought, my initial thought, well, if consciousness affects an electronic device, and it's provable, then that would be the next big thing. I mean, that would be huge. And I think in some circles it is, but I've learned that the dogma is very prevalent in our societies. And so one of the things I love about consciousness hacking is that we have open sort of forum for inquiry and the what ifs. What if this is possible and how would it work? And that leads to, I've seen a lot of progress. So these are just, I've done over 300 experiments over the last 3.5, 4 years. Not all of them are this significant, mostly at art events and just individual having stuff running on my own, and have come to, I think, a pretty solid understanding of how they work. And so right now we're in the development process of taking the technology, improving it, reconfiguring it, or not necessarily re-engineering it, but sort of going alchemy on it and combining it with all different types of things. So like one of the things I consider, there was a question about what is consciousness hacking earlier. I consider just hacking is like, it's the deconstruction and the reconstruction and adding different elements to any technology. So if you look here, you're actually looking at a couple of different technologies and hearing it. You've heard the sound that we've been playing up here. Those are binaural beats. They're sending out waves of entrainment. These sequencing lights are, because they're in a sequence, when you look at them, the brain, through something called mirror neurons, goes into an entrainment mode. And so your brain will begin to sequence itself, responding to inputs, light, sound. And although this is not, I guess, on brainwave frequency, the sounds you hear in the background are. And the lights that we have up here, flashing over there, and these, let me see here, are also, let me see here. Yeah, so these are flashing at a frequency. So one of our projects, you'll see that up there is AZoth Pyramid. This is just a 3D rendering of the final product. And this got started at SAND. Somebody approached me and said, hey, I want to build a 65-foot pyramid in the desert that incorporates elements of quantum physics and alchemy. And I was with somebody, he's like, hey, yeah, we can do that. And at American Steel, we can pretty much build anything there. It's got a 500,000 square foot warehouse, big cranes, very talented people. So we began this conversation. And my role was going to be the capstone, designing the capstone. And that's the very top of it. And it began to take a life of its own. And we ended up building a proof of concept model at American Steel, where we've shown it there, pre-compression for the last month, make it Faire. Every month we've had it there for about the last 4 or 5 months. And I'm really happy to say this last week we were actually interviewed by America's Greatest Makers. They're trying to recruit us for their season 2, compete for $1 million on TV, and build a consumer version of this. And this is what it looks like, some of the stages. So if you look on the left, this is right in front of my studio at American Steel, a few of my paintings that are behind it. And it was actually a recycled art project, a discarded art, some of the wood and stuff from the San Francisco Prototyping Festival. And the people from Maker Faire were having an event at American Steel, saw my artwork, and they said, oh, you've got to come to Maker Faire. And I said, okay, I'd love to, but they don't have any art galleries there. I'm going to have to build something. And so we already had the pyramid project coming on, so I thought, hey, let's build a pyramid. We need to build one anyway. So we took a bunch of wood, threw some LEDs in it, mixed the technologies, used the glasses, headsets, and evolved it. So you see, this is one. The picture in the middle is at one of the first art murmurs. So it's not quite a full pyramid yet. And then on the right over here, this is the finished product, what we actually had at Maker Faire. During the entire time we were there was an hour-long line, people waiting for a 5-minute experience. And what I found amazing, people wait in line for an hour, they get to the front and say, hey, what is this? I'm like, you're kidding. You waited for an hour and you don't know what it is. And, it's like, no, what is it? And I said, why did you wait for an hour if you didn't know what it was? They said, we saw the look on the faces of the people coming out, so we just knew we had to do it. And so when you walk up to the pyramid, you're automatically being what I call primed, or what is called primed. And that is, like right now, although it's a very subtle effect here, you're being entrained with the sequence lighting that you're seeing here. And you're creating a live, what I call a quantum biometric feedback loop with this lamp. you're being affected by the lights and sound one way, and you're affecting the lamp the other way, and it's a continuous cycle. And so part of our research and our development efforts is to create environments, single environments and large immersive environments where people can experience entrainment, which people report leads to a subtle euphoria. Most of the people that coming out of the pyramid after 5 minutes, they were totally jazzed, very excited about it. And almost everybody reported a refreshing feeling. People come back and be like, wow, I was kind of like dizzy when I got out, but after a few minutes, it was like a rush of energy. And it was surprising even to me that, because all of this was relatively new. A year ago, I wasn't thinking about pyramids at all, and this is meditation and consciousness has a part of this, but this was really an exploration into the nature of reality through quantum physics, which led into the consciousness component of this. And so it all sort of blends together. And let me see here. So here at American Steel, we do have a gallery. We can actually create shows pretty much anywhere. You can curate. I've curated weddings, corporate events. I was the curator for the first ever Queer Fashion Week. It was at American Steel. And part of what I have found over the years is that art does change lives in the matter of people create personal relationships with art, and everybody's different. Everybody has a different relationship. But what it does is it allows you to expand your own consciousness and look at the world in a different way that is emotionally meaningful for you. And so our one of the things I found, particularly as an art dealer, was money gets in the way of everything. And so part of the our policy is, when we were in Union Square, was if they catch you selling, you're dead. We're not selling anything. You can't sell. You can't convince somebody to fall in love with a piece of art. The only thing we can do is facilitate the process, increase desire, create desire, and educate. People will buy it or not buy it. But there's this thing called negotiation. And nobody wins a negotiation in art. I found that out. And I wanted to pull that out of it. So after a lot of trial and error, I created a business model that is very consciousness-driven, consciousness-oriented, and conflict-free. So we've taken prices out. There's a bidding process. There's never a negotiation. There aren't any salespeople involved. And it's really just interfacing and interacting with the art itself, and allowing people to either buy it or not buy it. And one thing that I do, not at every show are exhibitions, but I'll try to tie in something sciencey with the layout or the show itself. And so an example, these are two shows that we did recently for an open studio, and then the double slit, which I mentioned earlier. So what I did is, in front of the studio, created a maze in front of it of walls, and then put a curtain in front of it with two slits in it. And if somebody walked up to the curtain, or there was some tape on the floor, they'd walk in, they had to make a decision, the left slit or the right slit. If they went in through the left slit, that just walked right into the studio. Then they got the explanation of what the technology is, the experiment, and all of that. And then when they left, they had to go through the maze. And vice versa. If somebody came in through the maze, they had to be a wave first, and then they came out as a particle. So we explain the particle-wave duality by having them walk through a particle and a wave sort of layout. And so everybody that went through that show came out and said, I'll never forget what the double slit is, because they experienced it, they had an experience, and then through the slits, we had like a big painting of a double slit, and then, cutouts on the wall about the history of it, so somebody could walk through, just like at a museum you'd see, told the story. But we illustrated a concept, a scientific concept, and then reinforced it with art. And so that's where the art, for me, that's where the art and science comes together, is if you really look at them from the macro perspective, how artists look at it, they're one and the same. You can't really separate them. A long time ago, everybody's heard of alchemy, alchemists, right? Turning base metals into gold. That was a very fringe part of alchemy. But what do artists? What do artists do? They take base metals, base elements, paints, wood, fabric, recombine them all, and create something of value. And can't always buy it, but it's there. So this is what looks like. Part of our next venture is the Peace Academy. It's sort of like the educational component of what we're doing. And the picture on the left here, it was taken last month. We have the pyramid here, often called the entrainment chamber. Sound, analog sound, mixing board, art combined in here. And in preparing for today's presentation, just a few days ago, I was at NASA's website, and I found this photo. And this photo, somebody's preparing, 1962, preparing closed loop system. This was taken just down the street, NASA Ames Research Center. And I thought that the similarities were striking. And here we have somebody preparing to explore outer space, and over here, what we're exploring is inner space. And it's not just the inner space in our head, but this inner space between each other. How does that work? What is the space there? And so we're launching a couple of new initiatives. We have a museum, I guess you could say, membership program, and a couple of projects where we actually have a business as well. I'll talk about that in a second. But we call it the Ethernaut Consciousness Explorer, different levels of it. Little kids, beginners, and then to be an explorer is where you have to get into the data. And so I'm an Ethernaut, Thor's an Ethernaut, Emily's gonna be an Ethernaut, she doesn't know it yet. And the ether is what I refer to as just the energy that we do create expands around us. That's the ether sphere, and so collectively we all create an ether sphere, and we have our own. Some people call it soul or aura, lots of different names for it. That's my name for it. And so we have the ACE program where you'll be able to join us and explore inner space. One of the ways we do this and where our research is going is part of the business side, our revenue, and what we do to make a living at this point is systems integration for sort of mid to high-end home theater systems, smart home programming. I'm a Lutron, Radio Raw, Homeworks programmer. These are some of the brands we work on integrating it. And the reason why I got into this is I saw the potential to have this technology in people's homes. Most people don't understand it, so it would have to be a sort of a package deal. But I can imagine, I've got a project, I've got 5 new construction or retro projects right now, homes, and one of the rooms it's an all-glass room used for meditation. How many rooms out there are used for meditation rooms, theater rooms, home art galleries, all the places where we want to expand our consciousness and to get that sense of well-being or mindfulness, but the technology is very sporadic. So we can actually design entire rooms where if you want to go into meditation mode, you can just push a button, your entire house will change. We can incorporate randomness, entrainment into the LED lights, into rooms, bedrooms, family rooms. And eventually, I think by next year, we'll probably have something that's consumer ready that will integrate fully with the Lutron stuff. And so if anybody needs a sound system, just come talk to me afterwards. And here's another project we have going on. We call it Regina. It's an AI project. We have a 14,000 square foot venue in Oakland that is going to be bar, restaurant, concert, live music venue. And the only people we're really going to be hiring are Ethernauts, people who are consciousness explorers. And what we're doing is we're going to be wiring the entire place, probably about 10,000 feet of Ethernet wire, putting these types of sensors, collecting data from the entire area for every event. We're going to be recording video, all the live music events, and also have data correlation. So the entire thing is a giant consciousness research project that is also a commercial endeavor. My thoughts are if you design this right and create a great system that's leaves people feeling better when they leave than when they came in, they're going to keep coming back and they're going to patronize your business more. And so it's a positive business model. Business isn't always negative. It doesn't have to be. And I think this is a venue. It's an arts and entertainment venue, or as I call it, entrainment. And so we'll have entrainment. What people were experiencing in the pyramid with the glasses on, we're going to have on the dance floor. So we'll be broadcasting theta waves on the dance floor, increasing people's consciousness while they're increasing their own sort of augmented reality. And it's a form of AI because we'll be able to integrate it with different systems in the unit that things will be, lights might come on, sounds might come on, but no human can predict. There's no code there that's going to say exactly what. So the systemic interface of the people that are there will be having a subtle influence on it. Yes. Wait, let's talk at the end. Yeah. So that's going on. We also hope to be the East Bay location for consciousness hacking, and every month we will have an event called the Ethersphere, where we're going to invite all the consciousness hackers in the Bay Area or wherever to be there, show their wares, if you will. And these are some of our partners. American Steel Studios, Consciousness Hacking. For the AV stuff, I partner with a company in Oakland called Man Cave. Envelope Engineers are helping us build the pyramid. And whether we actually get on the show or not, we're building it anyway, and it'll be a tabletop version. So imagine you've got a tabletop, probably about this big, in your home, in a room with all the lights are out. An EEG headset, creating live feedback loops to the pyramid, the lights, flashing lights, in which it's sort of something similar to what we're doing now. It's infusing entrainment and then capturing the feedback and sending them right back into the lights, but in a much more dynamic manner. And so hopefully you'll be able to see us on TBS in the fall. And I think that's about it. Any questions? Josh?
What stage is Regina at right now?
Pardon?
Have you guys gone to space yet?
We're in the space. It's under seismic renovation, so it's actually, there's a couple of inspections to do, but we are looking at being open by the holidays with probably some off public scheduled events beginning in late August, early September. As soon as the bathrooms go in, you can come in and check it out.
Oh, next year?
This year. This year.
So if you do this type of thing in a home, right? So how would that look? Like you go into your kitchen and then you have the lights before you cook. I mean, like, so
Well,
I'm just curious.
How it would work is however you want it to work, because it's a pre-programmable system.
Okay.
So the
You
way
just set it up.
it's like scenes.
Mm-hmm.
It's like I want this scene. On this scene, I want this light to be at this percentage. I want that sound on. I want
Okay.
whatever.
So you
the
can
entire
sort of custom design the state you want people
around
to
your
be
lifestyle.
in a certain room.
Right. But if you had a room to where, like a meditation room, you could just go sit in it with your pyramid, turn it on, and then it might have a sequence running through lighting, like a 15-minute sequence or a 30-minute sequence or however many minutes you want to stay in there.
Okay.
And then sensors to measure it as well.
Right. Oh, and I have another question, if I'm allowed. So, in terms of the colors, is there a special meaning to any of the colors that the lamp?
Yes and no. I mean, colors definitely mean things. But what I found is individually, you'll find people that live with it have their own colors. So I'll give you an example. Somebody I know is a healer. She's a doctor, and she loves plants, right? Her lamp, she puts it on her table. It's almost always green. It's surrounded by plants. And it's green. She said it's just weird how it gets. So for her, her color is healing. It's green. I know somebody else who's got one by their computer. Every time a happy song comes in and they get in that, I want to go dancing mode, it also turns green. I've seen it red for excitement. I've heard a story. I wasn't there when it happened, but there was a colleague of mine that had a whole array of these on a wall, and modulating different colors. There's about 6 or 8 of them. And this woman has a car accident right out front and runs in a frantic, I just had an accident, I need to call, I don't have my phone. All the lamps turn red. All this excitement was in the air. And so it's different, it's situational. And so when you live with it or have it with your work, you'll find your own color for whatever situations.
So it's interesting because when we started the evening, it was light blue, and now we've reached the pink mode. What? Well, I don't know. It's positive, I suppose.
And it's not the type of thing you want to read too much meaning into it, but when you understand the technology behind there, it's pretty amazing. It's not like in your face, because somebody had mentioned they were interested in subtle energy earlier, and this is a very subtle effect. It's not something that is meant to impress or awe-inspire, but when you delve into the science behind it and look at it, it's like, wow, we have an effect. It's a subtle effect, but it's still an effect that's positive, strong enough to actually influence electronic devices in a meaningful way. And if anybody doesn't, or I would challenge anybody that's looking at this and like, I don't know, to go out and do the research. Read Dean Radin's book. Go to the Faire Labs. Look at it. Go to all the naysayers, all the people. There's a lot of people with a vested interest in this not being what it is, because this shows us we don't live in a materialist world. There's something more than what's in here and what's in our pockets. And so a lot of people have a vested interest in not being that. But if one of the things I like to do is go back to Galileo. His telescope was a device that if you looked in it over a period of time and experienced that device, it would show you that the Earth was not the center of the universe and that we indeed rotate around the sun. But had you been alive in those days and you walked in there and said, okay, let me look into your telescope, would you have been excited? Would what you have seen be so cool that it would have just totally blow your mind? No, you would have been looking at a little sliver in a scope in the sky. Not exciting at all. It only became relevant over a period of time, and if you really set yourself to look at this and look at the world a different way. But during Galileo's life, he asked thousands and thousands of people, just look in the telescope, just look at the data. No, people wouldn't look. And they would say the exact same thing I hear people say about this. Oh, you're misinterpreting the results. Oh, there must be a flaw in the technology. Oh, there must be this. Oh, there must be that. I don't need to look at it because I know it can't be that. So I would challenge anybody to really delve into it and look at the data yourself. I did not, when I saw it, I didn't just jump, oh, wow, this is great. I was like, well, I'm going to find this out for myself. And I got a couple of mind lamps, and I got an REG and started doing my research myself. Like, wow, there really is something there. And anyway, with that.
Yeah.
What's the passion that's driving you down this trajectory, especially with the entrainment stuff? Because it's I sort of read it as almost like you're not only exploring the biofeedback loop, but it seems like you're trying to close it. Is that true? Or what's driving you down this path of exploration?
I have no idea.
Fair answer.
I think it was actually just I saw some amazing stuff with art. I would see people come in and fall in love with art. I was like, I don't do that. And I saw art having an effect on people in a radical way. So I wanted to understand how that worked, and so that led me to the consciousness stuff. And my background in computers and engineering, it's just like I was in the semiconductor industry for a while, and after my period there, I was just like, there's nothing here. I was working for the world's largest semiconductor manufacturer, and I said, there's nothing here exciting for me, and I loved the job. I was awesome at what I did. I loved the people I worked with, but I couldn't see myself doing the same thing I was doing for the next 20 years. And so I got into the arts. I left that and got into the arts, which is just a complete wonder. I still don't get it, but I would say the drive for me is I was looking at this technology and what I think is possible with it. I do think, I served in the military, did over a dozen deployments, theater of war, saw a lot of, I was an engineer on a ship, so I didn't do any hand-to-hand or any of that. But I participated in the war machine, you know, and then after I got out, I was looking at it and I was like, okay, I saw this technology as a technology of peace. And the reason is that I don't think that the world will ever reach a state of peace. It's not going to happen during our lifetimes. And the only way it will happen is that we evolve as a species to a level where our consciousness has such a high level of empathy that we're unable to hurt each other in that way. And that's why the Peace Museum, it's a double entendre. It's peace as in consciousness expansion and what we can do, but it's also a technology of peace. I think that when you put this in a place, it brings people together, doesn't separate them. Increases empathy, that's just my theory. And that, because if it's increasing consciousness in all of your senses, empathy is one of those senses. And if we can put this in millions of homes, in one way or another, we will create our own subversive, empathy-driven society. You know, and it's not just this technology, we combine them all. It's all of the wellness, mindfulness. And so, you know, I have that personal drive, but it's also being a part of consciousness hacking in other places, where other people have that drive as well. And yeah, it's pretty cool how it's all rolling together. By the way, you're all getting entrained. And if anybody has any questions or wants to try a quick 5-minute entrainment session, we'll have the stuff up here. Come and see us. Look at the data. If you have any technical questions, we can talk about that as well. Any others? Any other questions? Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Leo. Now that we're all entrained.